Welcome to Conversations Through Alzheimer's. I'm Amber Marty.
And I'm Felicia Wood. We're sisters and daughters of Rosemary Marty, diagnosed with Alzheimer's in June of 2025.
We're documenting her journey as it happens, and we're sharing every resource we find along the way.
This is her story.
And ours.
Thanks so much for joining us today. Before we jump into today's episode, we're going to talk just a little bit about some of the things that have been going on this week. We figured it would be nice just to, especially in these episodes where we're having more of a conversation around one specific topic, to at least give a little bit of an idea of like what are some of the small things, like not the big headline stuff, but that comes up in the life of being a caretaker, also just navigating through the world with a family member who has Alzheimer's. So Amber, what's something that you've been dealing with this week?
Yeah, the biggest thing I can think of this week, my mom wasn't feeling that great this week. So I will say, like, I was surprised. She called me and she said she made her own doctor's appointment and she told me the time. So like, that was great. It was definitely a good day cognitively for her to be able to do that. So she just said, I have a doctor's appointment tomorrow, whatever time, 10 a.m. And I added it to her Skylight calendar in case she forgot and, everyone else would know. And so it was the next day. And, she's always like, even as she's had Alzheimer's, she doesn't want to be micromanaged, as nobody does, No. And so we've had to kind of figure out ways to like make sure that things are still getting done with her. Like she's getting to the appointment on time or didn't forget or anything like that without being like, don't forget or do this. Like, I don't want to treat her like a child, And so we have Find My Friends on, as I've mentioned in previous episodes. And so it was like 15 minutes before her appointment. And so it was like close enough to where if she didn't leave, I can call her and say like, you're going to be late if you don't leave right now, but like she should be on the way. So I checked her location and she was on the way. I think she was like almost actually there early. And I was like, that's great. And like the other thing with that is, ever since she got this diagnosis, me and Felicia have both been set up as like, what do you call it? Like a dependent account.
It's
we
like
basically
access.
Linked our accounts. Like if she gets like a test results or anything like that, they'll email us and say like, Rose has a new test result or anything like that. And so they did some tests there. And like before she even left the doctor's office, I got the emails. And so she didn't have to re-explain everything. So like when she called me, she really likes when I do that because then she doesn't have to remember like, oh, what did the doctor say? Or I not, because my dad was out of town for some context. So like she went to this appointment by herself and I don't want her to stress about like, well, I forgot what they said and everything. So she called me like 20 minutes after she got home and I was like, I already read your aftercare summary report. And she's like, oh, good. So we kind of found a balance of like letting her live her life still, that she's still in the early stages and but still getting the information.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think for me, the biggest thing was, as we've talked about before, my big area of responsibility on a consistent basis is the pills and the medications and kind of making sure that's all running smoothly. And I would say that lately had been kind of not running smoothly. It was running smoothly. It had a couple little hiccups. And I think it's important to talk about in the big picture of things, because when you're on a lot of different kind of supplements and pills, there's a lot of different places that you need to get them refilled. And what's a little bit unique about my responsibility in this system that we have is that like I don't have the same Amazon account that they have to order all of the supplements that are through Amazon. And so we kind of have this kind of like back and forth. Like you do a lot of assistance with that. Sometimes dad's the one who actually put the pills into the box. Mom sometimes helps with that. Then sometimes they'll realize they're running low on things and mom will be told that at the moment. Dad says, Mom, you go order more. Then she usually calls you. And then sometimes I'm hearing about it like the fourth in the chain. And so that's just totally fine. Yeah, it is a big game of telephone, but we kind of needed to, I feel like, reset a little bit. Like we needed to go back through the list. We needed to really figure out just some of the things that were causing some confusion and create a better plan. And I think this is really important because you have to have a moment where you just like are willing to look at your system that you currently have and say like, does this need tweaking? Do we need to take some feedback? Do we need to reposition it? So anyway, we did that this week and we had to jump on FaceTime while they were doing the actual pill sorting for the week. And I think that was really good because mom's coming to visit next week. And so just having that ahead of time made sure there was room for like less surprises, that we had a really good idea of what was going on. So that's what I was up to this week.
Yeah. Well, and that's actually a great segue because that was a very stressful week trying to call you, then call dad, then say we need to get on FaceTime. Like it was just a lot of stress. And today in this episode, we're going to be talking about the importance of lowering stress for people with Alzheimer's. We're going to look at it in two parts. First, the fact that the stress responses and tense environments are actually scientifically proven to hurt people with Alzheimer's more than others. And it even shows to increase the speed of decline, which we didn't know until we started doing this research. And two, we're going to be talking about the strategies to lower the stress by changing and being very intentional with how you communicate with people that have Alzheimer's.
Right. Yeah. I would say we really didn't understand the true effects of stress. I mean, it makes sense, right? Nobody seems to do well when they're under immense stress. But I think we didn't realize until we started seeing it in mom that when there would be like weeks that stress was very, very high, she would have a lot of bad days, almost to the point where we were having conversations like, is this progressing faster than we thought? I'm glad that we actually paused and said, well, let's try to lower her stress and try to approach things differently. Research that we're going to share today. And actually see if that helps, because what we noticed is that it did.
So in a healthy brain, the stress response is self-regulating. You know, your cortisol rises, which is normal, but then the hippocampus signals to the body to stand down. You know, it's not really a threat. You can calm down. People can generally come down for that pretty quickly. But in Alzheimer's, the hippocampus is actually one of the first regions to be damaged. So that off switch to stand down is kind of broken in a sense. And so that cortisol that gets elevated stays there longer. And with it being chronically high, it actually further damages the hippocampus, and then it's just this vicious cycle. So that's why it's so important. And what that meant for our mom, like instead of being able to understand that our dad wasn't mad at her for a situation, he was just mad at a situation, just like anybody can get frustrated or upset. Like it wasn't about mom. Like it would stress her out so much that she wasn't showing that she would, like Felicia said, she was just showing a lot more bad days than good. And we really wanted to figure out like, what is going on? Like, is it the stress? Like there has been a lot of appointments or situations recently, and it would just continue. Like even if a stressful situation happened on Monday, we would notice she would have a bad day every day, and it would be like Thursday and nothing else would happen Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So that's kind of like why we started digging into this research a little bit. And like one of the examples is my dad has always been kind of a loud person, like yelling at the TV, like if it's a sports game or the news or whatever. And shortly after the diagnosis, we were hearing very frequently from mom that he was constantly yelling, even if he was just, saying, go Broncos or whatever. And she felt scared. And that's because her brain could no longer register that the yelling at the TV wasn't her fault. It just triggered like a fight or flight response in her. So her heart would race and her body would feel like he was yelling at her. And we learned that it's because Alzheimer's affects the brain's ability to separate the source of the emotional trigger from the target. It's the prefrontal cortex, the part that would normally step in and go, oh, that's just the TV, not a big deal. He's not directing at me. I'm safe. That's like the Alzheimer's damages early on. And so the alarm goes off and her heart rate goes up, her cortisol goes up, her whole nervous system reacts as if the threat is her and aimed at her, because as far as her brain can tell, it is.
Yeah, exactly. And, it's interesting because as we've shared with mom's diagnosis, there was a lot early on where we were like, her anxiety is so high, her depression is so high. We didn't really understand like what she was going through from like a mental health perspective versus like a neurological perspective. And you can see in this conversation, like it is all connected. It is all, your brain controls everything and how you're processing things and everything. So yeah, it was definitely really hard for her. And I will also say, like, I think it was really hard for my dad. Like, I think, not only for him, like his wife was just diagnosed with Alzheimer's and now she's been so sensitive, not completely validly so. But now he's not only having to step into thinking about this time, like when a lot of this was happening, he was still working. So he's thinking, I'm still working. I'm still figuring out big life changes. What's coming next? How do I navigate this? And at the same time, like my wife keeps saying, that I'm yelling at her or she can't handle any interaction that we have. And I think for him, it was hard for him to take a really hard look at himself and say, I've got to approach things differently. And I think that's really common because, he was just be like, I'm not yelling. I'm not even talking to her. I'm just watching the news like I've done every other day of our marriage for the last, 40 years.
Yeah, it was kind of funny because coincidentally, I started going to the Alzheimer's caregiver support groups the same week that mom was telling us about how she's like scared more with dad yelling at the TV and stuff. And two husbands both said that their wives have been reporting the same thing. Like, you're screaming. Why are you screaming at me? Like, I haven't done anything. And they're like, what are you talking about? Like, I'm just talking to you the way I normally do. And they were finding it very hard as caregivers because they're just talking, but the wives are perceiving it as screaming. And I think that's when I called you after the caregiver support group. And I said, like, that's so funny. Like, mom was just saying the same thing. I wonder if this is like an Alzheimer's symptom. And that's kind of when we went down like this rabbit hole and realized that is an Alzheimer's symptom. And I think that's when we looked into like how Alzheimer's affects like the hippocampus and stress, and kind of dove deeper into this whole subject.
Exactly. There's actually a lot to learn about it, which is why we thought it would be so important to share today.
Yeah, exactly. So for mom's case, what we noticed is when she was stressed, like her daily functioning dropped well below the baseline for multiple days, like I mentioned before. And we weren't really sure if that was a true potential decline faster, or if we were entering the next stage potentially for this disease, or if it was just stress. And so we had to look at the whole scope of her daily life, the interactions, and try to figure out ways to lower her stress, like identify those stress triggers, because she could no longer say, I'm stressed out by X. Like, we kind of had to ask her questions and whatnot.
Yeah, it was really very hard to navigate, especially not being there, right? You know, I've imagined so many times over the course of this where how much easier it would be if I could just hear that something was happening on the phone and like just stop by their house and actually like get to the bottom of it. Like, watch the interaction, see how things are actually going, like check in, and that you could have a better handle on things. But like you said, it's really hard also because like that's their marriage, right? Like every couple has a dynamic that they have together. And like for my parents who have been married for 40 years, like they have their thing where it's like mom has certain things that she feels comfortable living a certain way and approaching him a certain way, and he is the same way. And so at first, like, I didn't want to interfere and just, call that up and just start yelling at him. Like, why are you doing this to mom? Like, why are you making her upset? So I feel like we had to really figure out the right way to approach it. And I imagine that this is very common after any kind of serious diagnosis. Like, it's a very stressful time. Anything medical related, anything with your health is very stressful for everybody. You're not only just having to go to either maybe more appointments or maybe take more medications or eat a different way, then have to layer on top of it, well, now I have to interact with somebody a different way, and I need to change my communication skills and my approach. And that's a lot to process all at once. So I think it took a while. Like, I think that probably one thing we should do is like go over the examples of what did that actually look like, right? Because some of them were like really sneaky things. And like a lot of this was over the course of like 6 to 8 months of really things would come up, and then we would try to reflect back and try to give feedback and change it. So do you have an example in mind?
Yeah, I have a handful of examples. So one is when my mom and dad were going to an appointment. I think it was to see if she was eligible for the IV infusions. And it's like part of like a whole network, and half of the appointments were in Boulder that they had been going to for this network. And so my dad just assumed that this appointment was in Boulder and didn't look at where it was, but it was actually in Denver. And so they started going on the road, and granted, again, me and Felicia weren't there, so we're hearing all this after the fact, but this is how we have been told it went down. Yeah. Like, basically my dad started driving and my mom said, where are you going? She's still in the early stages. She knows like the roads around them. She's still driving and stuff. And he's like, more to this appointment. She's like, it's in Denver. Like, why are you getting on this highway or this road? And he was like, oh, what? Like, what's the address? Like, didn't even look ahead. He also wanted to stop somewhere really quick and like do an errand for himself. And like, they ended up getting to the appointment fine. Like, they weren't late, but they did not leave themselves enough time to, especially with going the wrong direction for a little bit at first, they did not leave themselves enough time to like park and go in together. Like, my dad called me saying, I think I've still shared this story in a previous episode, but like, he just dropped her off at like valet and told her, get out. Okay, go check in. You can't do that with an Alzheimer's patient. Like, you need to go in together, especially a new location, a new doctor. I mean, and she was fine. Like, it wasn't bad, but like the point was, is like, you need to be supportive and stay with your partner.
Yeah. And I was just going to say, like, it really affected the appointment. Like, she was like, they would ask her questions that it's important for her to answer for herself. And I think she seemed so defeated. Like, she would just be like, you answer. Like she just kind of like, those are the kind of things where like, it's kind of like you have to choose where you're going to spend your energy. Are you going to spend your energy fighting on your way to get to the appointment? Or are you going to try to preserve, like help mom preserve the energy that she has so that she can show up at the appointment with as much brain power as she can?
Exactly. And so, we did reflect afterwards and said, like, okay, from now on, we're going to put the addresses in the skylight, or, talk about, like, we implemented family meetings, like, talk about the week before what appointments are coming up. And luckily, a lot of those appointments have slowed down, so that hasn't been much of an issue. But we realized, like, how stressful those appointments can be if we are not taking the time and making sure we're leaving them plenty of time and going together and everything.
Exactly.
So that was one of the examples. Another one that's been actually more recent is my mom is very routine oriented, as a lot of people with Alzheimer's are. It's very important that they stick to their routine. And so she gets up in the morning, she gets her eggs, gets the dog breakfast, takes her pills. And there's very important things in that too, like immediately puts in her hearing aids so she doesn't decline faster, and things like that. And I called her, I don't know, a few hours into her day. It was like noon Eastern, like 10 a.m. her time. And she could just tell, like, she was having like just an off day, and she was like, sorry, like I'm having an off day. Like your dad came in here in the morning and said he needed something for my computer and I had to log on, and he ruined my routine. And the whole day just got screwed up because she just wasn't expecting that. And so like we really learned, like, she needs to like at least get her morning routine done, and then like dad can ask her whatever questions. We're not saying you can never ask that person with Alzheimer's a question or ask them to do something, but like letting them get through their morning routine or their evening routine, I think, is very important for keeping them on track, because it signals to the brain like you're safe, you're good.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. It's very important. It's important to have respect for what the other person's expectations are as well, right? Like if she kind of expects to be achieving certain milestones in the morning, that can be the difference of, like you said, having a good day or having a bad day. And a lot of that has to do with like keeping stress lower, right? When you're achieving things exactly as you expected, it's very predictable, and you're not being met by something that you had no idea was coming, even if it's as simple as, I need to pay this thing and like help me figure out this paperwork, or, I need to help you with this. This is on my list today. So now you have to start doing this at this time when we didn't already talk about it. Like that creates stress, like that, especially for a person with Alzheimer's. That is the kind of stressful moment where it uses up so much cognitive power. It kicks her into fight or flight. There's cortisol happening in the brain. All of these things are real biological mechanisms that you can't just say like, well, don't let it stress you out. Just don't let it bother you. Like just be flexible. Like we do try to put some of that back on mom. We do try to say like, mom, like you have to take a deep breath, like be resilient, like try to let stuff go. Like not with the sense of like she has to do that, but more just like trying to encourage her as often as we can with positive talk. But it's really helpful when everybody in the situation is also trying to keep stress lower.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like you mentioned, like the missing paperwork or things like that. Like that's been a big thing for her, or just misplacing items in general. I think that's very common with Alzheimer's. You set it down, you have no idea where you set it. I think that's common with anybody, but especially Alzheimer's. She was like every time me and Felicia calls her, she always answers on her watch. She's like, call me back in 1 minute. I need to find my phone,
Exactly.
And so you call her back in a minute, and she's like, oh, okay, I found my phone. And so like same thing with like paperwork, like she's like, oh well, I printed that off somewhere, where did I put it? And so I think like another thing that she has even realized is like decluttering as much as possible, making things very simplified to where you just have like a stack of like a couple papers, or she's been really trying to get rid of a lot of stuff because she wants her life to be simplified and trying to find things. She's identified that like that's been a stressor for her, so she's been trying to work through that.
Yeah. But it's interesting too, because like, not only is it important to like think about the kind of lowering the stress of like things that she does find stressful or not stressful, but also what we noticed is like interactions can make her feel that fight or flight type thing, right? So like there's been many days where like passwords don't go well. She can't find her password. She has to reset a password. And then sometimes like if she can't get a hold of you, or like something that her and dad are working on together, she'll have to get dad involved. And dad like would not be upset with her, right? He would be but he would maybe get frustrated about a situation. Maybe it's something he didn't want to be doing at that time, or that he also wasn't aware of, or it had like too many screens or whatever to have to reset, or like, two-factor authentication. And so for a while, like at first I would notice that he would lower his voice. So like he wouldn't be like getting loud, because we kept saying like, you can't get loud. Or she would tell him like, you're so loud, you're so loud. And so he would start to get quieter in volume, but he would still be like very frustrated in his tone of voice. Like he would have, yeah, exactly. Like, we need to click over here, like, and that's like the same thing. Like one of the things that we had to really try to coach him up on was like, you can't just be like frustrated with her. And I feel like there were some examples that you have, like even where like you overheard interactions like that with them, where like he would say things that were just, I mean, again, we're not trying to come at my dad here, but like they would affect my mom more than usual because of how he was saying them.
Yeah. I don't remember the specifics, but I remember like me and my mom were FaceTiming and he came in and needed something from the computer. You can just like see the energy draining from her face, like as he was talking. Cause again, he wasn't like, what was it? Like, I think he said something like under his breath, like, no, it's fine. It's my fault. Like trying to say it's his responsibility. Like, I'm not mad at you. Like, it's me, like whatever. But like, it was the tone that like she still felt like her nervous system, like we talked about, was like, he's upset. This is my fault. And then the rest of the day was impacted by that. Even though because he was just making those snide remarks, and like she didn't have that off switch in her hippocampus to say like, oh, he's having a moment, it's fine, I'm gonna go about my day,
or it's not really my fault.
Exactly.
It got to the point where I really felt like, again, I don't always feel like I have a lot of responsibilities, like as much day to day as you have with this, but I obviously care about the situation. And I feel like I ended up emailing dad, because that's, again, every family has different kind of communication styles and ways to approach things. And like, what I really did not want is I did not want my dad to feel attacked. And I wanted him to have a chance to hear what I was saying in a neutral way. I wanted to give him some links to some of the like scientific research that shows how these kind of interactions actually cause a tremendous more amount of stress for a person who has Alzheimer's than for maybe the wife that you married 20 years ago, right? Like without Alzheimer's. And so I had actually sent him an email where I just like tried to just present it as neutrally as possible. Like, when a person when someone with Alzheimer's is in a tense or emotionally charged environment, it doesn't matter if it's directed at them. It could even just be like at a sports game or in a conversation where somebody is mad at somebody else, right? Like you could have been mad at me and like talking about me to mom, and she would still feel like something is wrong, something is scary here. Like it's that when things are unexpected, right? Like something is happening that I wasn't prepared for. So try to tell dad this, like, you have to try to prioritize calm, low stress. And I really tried to emphasize, like, it's how the interactions feel. So it doesn't just matter if the volume is low, like it has to be positive, like you have to try to make it feel like things are okay, instead of make it feel like things are very stressful, but you said it in a lower tone of voice. Mm-hmm. And it seems like since presenting those articles and actually like working on this, and like we've all had to work on it in different ways, like it does seem like it's caused a lot, or like it's helped a lot.
Yeah, I agree. And I think those articles, we were even reviewing them again last night as we were preparing for this episode. And I was like, these are great articles. Like, I think we'll link them in the show notes if anyone is interested, because they're great. And maybe if you need to share them with somebody in your family or one of your friends that is going through this and this resonates with you. I know a lot of people, like my dad is always like, there's no scientific research. And so like, we always have to like get articles or like show him the research. So if anyone else has somebody in their life like that, like we'll put them in the show notes for you.
Like dad definitely wants to see, you don't have to keep this part, but dad definitely wants to see in the writing, like, and I think a lot of people do, they want to see like that this actually matters. It's not just your opinion, or it's not just fluff. It's actually will make a difference. And so I will also say one of the things that I think we also did that helped is we would show what it looks like to have that positive low stress and then be like, see, like here the stress was lower and she's doing better. Like I think showing that example also really helped build that trust that it's worth it to try to make those changes. And I will say one thing we found was like going to Disney World was a big breakthrough. And that was a really risky thing we did in some ways because we weren't sure, like traveling 2 hours ahead, very, high energy place, a lot of going on in a very fast, short timeline. But we really thought about like, well, how can we make that as low stress as possible? And we spent a lot of time together back and forth on the phone thinking like through different ideas. Well, how can we do this? What would be the approach? And I feel like I was kind of like your sounding board and trying to figure out some of these ideas. But I think you should definitely talk about some of the things you did for that trip in particular, because I think even if you're not just traveling, you can take some of those exact ideas and see them in your real life, and like it can go really well.
Yeah. So like one of the biggest things, like we've talked about earlier, like I think it's very important for her to like try to keep her morning routine. And like how do you do that when you don't have your house, you don't have your cooking utensils, you don't have anything? So one of the things that Disney does is they have villas, which is basically like a little apartment. And so like we had like a 2-bedroom villa that had a kitchen and a stove and a fridge and stuff. And she eats her eggs every morning. And I really wanted to make sure she continued to eat her eggs to have a lot of protein. It's good for your brain. And the other thing I wanted to do is like, I wanted to make sure that she didn't have to think about where's the spatula, where's the pan for these things. So like I took it upon myself. I was like, I'm going to make her breakfast every morning. Half of that was to keep her stress lower. And the other half is like to make sure we get out the door on time. Like even though it's Disney purpose. And like we weren't doing like, rope dropping or anything, but like we definitely like, we're like, oh, we want to try to get our fast pass that we had reserved or whatever. And so like, I wanted her to focus on just getting ready. And then she would come out in the morning and I'd say, okay, here's your berries and your eggs. And here's like a little, protein bar or whatever. And she just had a great morning. She was laughing. She was like low key. And like, because she was happy, my dad was happy. And like, it was just like a cycle of that. Like she was low stress and like the entire day then was better. And like the other part of this was like, I kind of had to think to myself, like, what could she possibly need throughout the day? We talked about in our previous episodes, like she's on a pretty like strict diet with her functional medicine doctor to keep her inflammation low in her body. And I felt kind of bad talking to Felicia about like, the cinnamon rolls we're going to eat and the Mickey bars and all this stuff and thinking like, man, mom's not going to be able to have any of this. Like I wanted to make sure she had snacks in my bag that like, we're getting that like, okay, well, what snack do you want? Like I have these options and like she really appreciated that. Like I didn't want her to ever feel like hungry or like sad that she didn't have like a treat. So I always had a variety of snacks in the morning that I put in my bag.
And I will say food is a big stress thing, right? When you're hungry and you want something to eat and you feel like you can't have it, like that can, as anybody knows, like if you don't have the food you need, that can turn very stressful fast. So that was a really great thing that you did.
Yeah. Or like even like ponchos or, we went in January, it was cold, even though it was Florida, like we packed an extra jacket, like little thing, like thinking through like what could they possibly need throughout the day that like it doesn't have to turn into a stressful situation. And so I think that really helped.
Yeah, it does. And I think even just hearing you say it like that, like it makes so much sense. And I think it's a good reminder for anybody who's a caretaker, because when you are caring for somebody, you are doing some of that brain power for them. Like what could they need? What will make their life better? Doing those things really does go a really long way, instead of just saying like, well, you're a woman, you can figure out what you need. If you don't remember your jacket, like you can just be cold or choose to buy something. Like with a person who has Alzheimer's or any other kind of condition, like you want to do your best to actually love and care for that person. This is a really good way to do that. And it definitely lowers their stress and cognitive load.
Yeah, we really saw that all week. I mean, like we were like, well, she's at the first day, like maybe she's just having a good day, but like the entire week, because we got in a routine. And honestly, like if you guys are interested in hearing a whole episode on just the Disney trip, like we have so many examples. Like we did so much, and it was really super successful. My mom, every time we talked to her, like, I've been thinking about Disney a lot. Like she wants to go back to Disney, and I'm like, I would too if somebody planned something for me and I just had to show up and say what's next,
Although maybe not, because you love to plan.
I was gonna say, like, not me in particular. Like, I want to plan, but like I can see, like, it was good. Everyone had a good time because everyone had their roles, and
well, we
she
had
felt
the right
taken care of.
expectations going into it.
Exactly. And, we had we had a lot of loose plans that were flexible. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And so I think that's very important as well.
exactly. Yeah, I think it's interesting because one of the things I think you said early on was like, let's just do whatever we can to help her reserve as much brain power as possible, right? Like, because especially in a place like Disney World, like if she wants to like go shopping and in Epcot, or if she wants to stay out late to watch the parade, like sometimes you're like running a marathon. And so like you don't want to like you said, like have her waste a lot of cognitive energy on like making breakfast in a place you're not familiar with, or figuring out like what stand you can actually eat, like an egg sandwich or whatever. Just taking some of that out of it made it so that you can like, and we try to remind her that now, like when we're not in Disney World and we're not there with her, it's like, Mom, you only have so much energy throughout the day. Like you don't want to like waste it all in the morning if you know there's something you want to do in the afternoon.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good point.
Yeah. 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 The other thing I would say is like, it was very interesting. I do think that it was around when we went in January, that was around the time we'd been having a lot of those conversations with Dad around like, be calm, like really like be positive. And he also was like in rare form with how calm and chill he was. In fact, he made multiple comments about it. He was like, see how chill I am? See how, and they did so great. Like they really just had a really great time together. And it was really, I think that was a really good example of how the little things can really add up to make the good days great. And in that trip in particular, I don't think that she had a bad day. I'm trying to think of like if we've ever had a day that started out bad that we were able to kind of get back to good. I don't think that's really how it is. Seems like if you wake up and have start a bad day, it kind of
exactly.
stays
It's like
bad.
anybody. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I think that's just very typical of Alzheimer's. We've talked about that a lot in support groups, like and like I've even talked about that with Mom in particular. Like even she can wake up and just know it's going to be like if she can't figure out her words, and she's talking to Dad right away in the morning.
Off.
Like maybe you just didn't sleep very well that night, and like sleep is a huge contributor to how for Alzheimer's or not, or how you function cognitively. If you don't sleep well, or something got interrupted, or woke up on the wrong side of the bed, it's hard. But the goal is to keep more good days than bad, and lowering stress can help that.
Yeah, exactly. So I think the final thing that I was hoping we could share, just a small list that we had kind of put together, is just like ways to prioritize in our communication with each other, because I do think that those go a really long way. So one is keep your tone not just neutral, but positive and reassuring. I think this is not only good with somebody who's in early stages, because I think it continues to build trust and lower stress, but obviously I imagine that somebody who's in later stages and going through a lot of confusion or whatever, like the best thing you can do is just be positive, be reassuring. The next is let go of small mistakes instead of revisiting them. That was something that I can remember early on, like you and I had to actually catch each other doing in a lot of our conversations with Mom, where like if something went wrong, like the wrong milligrams got ordered for a prescription or something didn't happen, like instead of being like, well, where were you when this happened? Or why did this happen? Or tell me about what you think about this. It's like, just, it's okay to just be like, yeah, that happens. Yeah. Or like, yeah, the pills fall. What? Like, just don't sweat the small stuff. Like, just keep moving. Another one is like, give her time to find words without necessarily like jumping in. Like, this is kind of tricky because there are times, like, especially with our mom, where like sometimes like throwing her the word is like giving her a lifeline. Like it helps her actually keep her train of thought together versus like her kind of losing it. But at the same time, it's a fine balance, because you don't ever want a person that you're talking to who's capable of figuring out their words or trying to express themselves to feel like you're just hurrying them along by filling in the words for them. So I think that one can be a little bit tricky, but like I think it's always good just to pause, and then you can even ask them like like maybe you're having a tougher day, like do you want me to try to help with the word, like you can always ask and see how they feel as well. So then the final one is just when tension builds in any moment, whether you're like on your way to an appointment or there's logistics, there's time pressure or stressful password situation, just life, like just try your best just to let those moments end. Don't try to carry it into the appointment. If you're in the appointment, don't say, oh, well, such and such just happened and now we're late. And that, like, all of that makes it harder to process and communicate. Like, we just, all of those things make a big difference. So those were a couple of things I just wanted to make sure we went through. And I don't know. I hope this helps. I really think that you can find meaningful difference if you really put in the work. It does take a lot of vulnerability and like a lot of courage to actually change how you're approaching things. But I think it really makes a really big difference.
Yeah, I agree. We've experienced it firsthand.
Exactly. So, try it out. There's literally no harm that can happen from just approaching this. And the best part is if you've somehow started listening to this just out of curiosity for our journey as well, I don't think that any of these tips are bad for approaching everybody in your life, whether it's your toddler, your partner too. It's like, honestly, all of this is fundamental, just coming down to like respecting each other and caring for each other, which is never a bad reminder. So with that, we really appreciate you taking the time to join us today. Thank you so much, and we'll talk to you next time.
Bye-bye.
If this episode resonated with you, or if someone you love is navigating an Alzheimer's diagnosis, please know you don't have to fight it alone. The Alzheimer's Association is a free 24/7 resource available to anyone who needs their support. Whether you're newly diagnosed, deep in caregiving, or just trying to understand what comes next, you can reach them anytime at 1-800-272-3900. You can also reach them online at alz.org.